Page 23 in the Hansard textbook describes the differences between determinate and indeterminate sentencing. Determinate sentences are fixed periods of incarceration, while indeterminate sentences are more flexible and that the minimum and maximum amount of time served can be influenced by a number of factors, such as good behavior. We see this in Shawshank Redemption starting at the 2-hour, 6-minute, 27-second mark, where Red is released on parole 40 years into his life sentence. In Brokedown Palace at the 26-minute, 44-second mark, the Thai attorney advises the two girls to plead guilty because they won't be sentenced more than 40 years. The Martinson report, as described on page 25 in the Hansard textbook, concluded that with few and isolated exceptions, the rehabilitative efforts that have been reported so far have had no appreciable effect on recidivism and was widely used to oppose rehabilitative programs. Warden Norton was also of this school of thought, telling the new inmates starting at the 14-minute, 26-second mark, "I believe in two things, discipline and the Bible. Here you'll receive both." The brutalization hypothesis, as discussed on page 6 in the Hansard textbook, postulates that the use of harsh punishments sensitizes people to violence and teaches them to use violence rather than deterring them from it. Research has found cases where exposure to prison actually increases the likelihood of future criminal behavior. For example, in Shawshank Redemption, while describing the money laundering scheme to Red starting at the 1-hour, 21-minute, 41-second mark, Andy says, "On the outside, I was an honest man, straight as an arrow. I had to come to prison to be a crook." Similarly, in Brokedown Palace at the 1-hour, 11-minute, 49-second mark, Alice resorted to illegally buying their way out of prison. The Ruffin v. Commonwealth case, as discussed on page 19 in the Hansard textbook, noted that an inmate was a slave of the state while serving their sentence. Consequently, this pretty much incentivized the mistreatment of inmates as there was no incentive or consequence to do otherwise. We see this in Shawshank Redemption starting at the 1-hour, 36-minute, 15-second mark, when Warden Norton had Tommy shot so that there was no one to testify in Andy's case, and he faced no repercussions for this. According to labeling theory as discussed on page 51 in the Hansard textbook, the criminal label leads to stigmatization and exclusion from conventional roles, effectively standing in the way of an offender reintegrating back into society. Labels such as offender or convict impair an individual's ability to obtain employment and housing, among other things. In Shawshank Redemption, Brooks had been incarcerated for 50 years and had developed an identity within the prison. When he found out he was going to be released, he almost killed Haywood starting at the 57-minute, 57-second mark so that he could stay. In Brokedown Palace, Darlene's dad is strongly influenced by Alice's new label and thoroughly believes she's guilty, evidenced at the 35-minute, 55-second mark where he yells at her to lie about her innocence. Kaufman's prison guard subculture, as discussed on page 243 in the Hansard textbook, promotes cohesion among the guards. In Brokedown Palace, starting at the 1-hour, 27-minute, 36-second mark, the Minister of Justice goes back on his agreement with attorney Hank Green to pardon the girls, out of loyalty to his police force. Guards are expected to always have each other's backs in both moments of physical and verbal conflict with inmates. In Shawshank Redemption, starting at the 36-minute mark, all the guards point their guns at Andy when he approaches Captain Hadley on the roof. Guards are also expected to never disrespect one another in front of the inmates, traffic drugs, be a snitch, or befriend inmates. The 5 pains of imprisonment, as discussed on page 231 in the Hansard textbook, are deprivations that occur as a result of incarceration. One pain is the loss of liberty, which can be seen at the 1-hour, 32-minute, 42-second mark, when Andy reassures Warden Norton that he wouldn't disclose their money laundering scheme, and he gets thrown in solitary for a month. The second pain is the loss of readily available goods and services, which can be seen at the 22-minute, 35-second mark, when Haywood was excited over all the cigarettes he had won in a bet. The third pain is the loss of heterosexual relationships, which can be seen at the 32-minute mark, when Boggs rapes Andy in the laundry room. The fourth pain is the loss of autonomy, which can be seen at the 14-minute, 5-second mark, when one of the new inmates asks Captain Hadley when they would get to eat, and he responds, "You eat when we say you eat." The fifth pain is the loss of personal security, which can be seen at the 19-minute, 3-second mark, when one of the new inmates who became hysterical was pulled out of his cell by Captain Hadley and was beaten. Pages 303 through 306 in the Hansard textbook discuss 3 critical issues for female offenders: trauma, substance abuse, and mental health issues. Trauma plays a key role as more than half of female offenders report both physical and sexual abuse experiences prior to being incarcerated. An example of this can be seen in Brokedown Palace starting at the 1-hour, 13-minute, 44-second mark, where Alice tells Darlene that after Nick Parks kissed her, he also tried to coerce her into having sex with him. Substance abuse is also particularly relevant among female offenders, as those with a history of trauma and abuse use drugs and alcohol more frequently than male offenders. Mental health is also of particular importance, as diagnoses of depression and PTSD are common among those who were abused, and they may use drugs and alcohol to self-medicate. In Broke Down Palace, at the 55-minute, 55-second mark, Alex starts smoking weed in the prison to deal with the pains of imprisonment. There are two types of juvenile delinquents as discussed on page 369 in the Hanser textbook. Adolescent limited juvenile delinquents don't continue their criminal career into adulthood, as prosocial activities become more rewarding than crime. An example would be Red from Shawshank Redemption. Starting at the 2-hour, 7-minute, 48-second mark, Red tells the parole board, "I look back on the way I was then, a young, stupid kid who committed that terrible crime. I want to talk to him. I want to try and talk some sense into him. Tell him the way things are, but I can't. That kid's long gone, and this old man is all that's left." Life course persistent juvenile delinquents are adolescents who continue their criminal behavior into and throughout adulthood. An example would be Tommy from Shawshank Redemption. Starting at the 1-hour, 25-minute, 46-second mark, Tommy tells the guys how he's been in and out of prison since he was 13 years old. Many life course persistent juvenile delinquents come from high-risk social environments and lack many of the necessary social skills and opportunities that allow adolescent limited delinquents to move on to more prosocial behaviors. Braithwaite's theory, as discussed on page 458 in the Hanser textbook, posits that shaming is necessary for both the offender and social control in general, as there needs to be a consequence for illegal behavior. Even among the inmates, shaming is used for social control. For example, starting at the 11-minute, 37-second mark in Shawshank Redemption, all the prisoners are yelling and banging against the gate in an attempt to scare the new inmates getting off the bus. After the offender has experienced the full impact of their consequences, however, society shouldn't continue to punish them. Stigmatization adds consequences beyond the original sentence, leading to increased recidivism rates. Starting at the 1-hour, 2-minute, 56-second mark, the parole board in Shawshank Redemption tried to prevent this from happening by getting Brooks a room at a halfway house and a job at a grocery store.